from suffocation in the kitchen, the dining room, and the connubial chamber, and it will immediately conclude that the corpse is already laid out in the drawing room. 28. Woman as wife. This boredom of marriage, however, is not nearly so dangerous a menace to the institution as Mrs. Cox, with evangelistic enthusiasm, permits herself to think it is. It bears most harshly upon the wife, who is almost always the more intelligent of the pair. In the case of the husband, its pains are usually lightened by that sentimentality with which men dilute the disagreeable, particularly in marriage. Moreover, the average male gets his living by such depressing devices that boredom becomes a sort of a natural state to him. A man who spends 6 or 8 hours a day acting as a teller in a bank, or sitting upon the bench of a court, or looking to the inexpressibly trivial details of some process of manufacturing, or writing imbecile articles for a newspaper, or managing a tramway, or administering ineffective medicines to stupid and uninteresting patients, a man so engaged during all his hours of labor, which means a normal typical man, is surely not one to be oppressed unduly by the dull round of domesticity. His wife may bore him hopelessly as mistress, just as any other mistress inevitably bores a man, though surely not quickly and so painfully as a lover bores a woman. But she is not apt to bore him so badly in her other capacities. What he commonly complains about in her, in truth, is not that she tires him by her monotony, but that she tires him by her variety. Not that she is too static, but she is too dynamic. He is weary when he gets home, and asks only the dull peace of a hog in comfortable sty. This peace is broken by the greater restlessness of his wife, the fruit of her greater intellectual resilience and curiosity. Of far more potency as a cause of connubial discord is the general inefficiency of a woman at the business of what is called keeping house, a business founded upon a complex of trivial technicalities. As I have argued at length, women are congenitally less fitted for mastering these technicalities than men. The enterprise always costs them more effort, and they are never able to reinforce mere diligent application with that obtuse enthusiasm which men commonly bring to their tawdry and childish concerns. But in addition to their natural incapacity, there is a reluctance based upon the deficiency in incentive, and that deficiency in incentive is due to the maudlin sentimentality with which men regard marriage. In this sentimentality lies the germ of most of the evils which beset the institution in Christendom, and particularly in the United States, where sentiment is always carried to inordinate lengths. Having abandoned the medieval concept of woman as temptress, the men of the Nordic race have revived the correlative medieval concept of woman as angel, and to bolster up that character, they have created for her a vast and growing mass of immunities, culminating of late years in the astounding doctrine that, under the contract of marriage, all the duties lie upon the man, and all the privileges appertain to the woman. In part this doctrine has been established by the intellectual emprise and audacity of woman. Bit by bit, playing upon masculine stupidity, sentimentality, and lack of strategical sense, they have formulated it, developed it, and entrenched it in custom and law. But in other part, it is the plain product of the donkeyish vanity which makes almost every man view the practical incapacity of his wife as, in some vague way, a tribute to his own high-mindedness and consideration. Whatever revolt against her immediate indolence and efficiency, his ideal is nearly always a situation in which she will figure as a magnificent drone, a sort of empress without portfolio, entirely discharged from every unpleasant labor and responsibility. 29. Marriage and the law. This was not always the case. No more than a century ago, even by American law, the most sentimental in the world, the husband was the head of the family firm, lordly and autonomous. He had authority over the purse strings, over the children, and even over his wife. He could enforce his mandates by appropriate punishment, including the corporal. His sovereignty and dignity were carefully guarded by legislation, the product of thousands of years of experience in ratiocination. He was safeguarded in his self-respect by the most elaborate and efficient devices, and they had the support of public opinion. Consider now the changes that a few short years have wrought. Today, by the laws of most American states, laws proposed in most cases by maudlin and often notoriously extravagant agitators, and passed by sentimental orgy, all of the old rights of the husband have been converted into obligations. He no longer has any control over his wife's property. She may devote its income to the family, or she may squander that income upon idle follies, and he can do nothing. She has equal authority in regulating and disposing of the children, and, in the case of infants, more than he. There is no law compelling her to do her share of the family labor. She may spend her whole time in cinema theaters or gadding about the shops as she will. She cannot be forced to perpetuate the family name if she does not want to. She cannot be attacked with masculine weapons, for example, fists and firearms, when she makes an assault with feminine weapons, for instance, snuffling, invective, and sabotage. Finally, no law penalty can be visited upon her if she fails absolutely, either deliberately or through mere incapacity, to keep the family habitat clean, the children in order, and the victuals eatable. Now view the situation of the husband. The instant he submits to marriage, his wife obtains a large and inalienable share in his property, including all he may acquire in future. In most American states, the minimum is 1/3, and failing children, 1/2. He cannot dispose of his real estate without her consent. He cannot even deprive it of her by will. She may bring up his children carelessly and idiotically, cursing them with abominable manners and poisoning their nascent minds against him, and he has no redress. She may neglect her home, gossip and lounge about all day, put impossible food upon his table, steal his small change, pry into his private papers, hand over his home to the Periplaneta Americana, accuse him falsely of preposterous adulteries, affront his friends, and lie about him to the neighbors, and he can do nothing. She may compromise his honor by indecent dressing, write letters to moving picture actors, and expose him to ridicule by going into politics, and he is helpless. Let him undertake the slightest rebellion, over and beyond mere rhetorical protest, and the whole force of the state comes down upon him. If he corrects her with the bastinado or locks her up, he is good for 6 months in jail. If he cuts off her revenues, he is incarcerated until he makes them good. And if he seeks surcease in flight, taking the children with him, he is pursued by the gendarmerie, brought back to his duties, and depicted in the public press as a scoundrel kidnapper, fit only for the knout. In brief, she is under no legal necessity whatsoever to carry out her part of the compact at the altar of God, where he faces instant disgrace and punishment for the slightest failure to observe its last letter. For a few grave crimes of commission, true enough, she may be proceeded against. Open adultery is a recreation that is denied to her. She cannot poison her husband. She must not assault him with edged tools, or leave him altogether, or strip off her few remaining garments and go naked. But for the vastly more various and numerous crimes of omission, and in some they are more exasperating and intolerable than even overt felony, she cannot be brought to book at all. The scene I depict is American, but it will soon extend its horrors to all Protestant countries. The newly enfranchised women of every one of them cherish long programs of what they call social improvement, and practically the whole of that improvement is based upon devices for augmenting their own relative autonomy and power. The English wife of tradition, so thoroughly a femme couverte, is being displaced by a gadabout, truculent, irresponsible creature, full of strange new ideas about her rights, and strongly disinclined to submit to her husband's authority, or to devote herself honestly to the upkeep of his house, or to bear him a biological sufficiency of heirs. And the German Hausfrau, once so innocently consecrated to Kirche, Kuch, and Kinder, is going the same way. 30. The emancipated housewife. What has gone on in the United States during the past 2 generations is full of lessons and warnings for the rest of the world. The American housewife of an earlier day was famous for unremitting diligence. She not only cooked, washed, and ironed, she also made shift to master such more complex arts as spinning, baking, and brewing. Her expertness, perhaps, never reached a high level, but at all events she made a gallant effort. But that was long, long ago, before the new enlightenment rescued her. Today, in her average incarnation, she is not only incompetent, a lack, as I have argued, rather beyond her control, she is also filled with the notion that a conscientious discharge of her few remaining duties is, in some vague way, discreditable and degrading. To call her a good cook, I dare say, was never anything but flattery. the early American cuisine was probably a fearful thing indeed. But today the flattery turns into